I'm Kate Masters for the Frederick News Post, and this is Beyond the Ballot, a series of in-depth interviews with Frederick County's most recently elected officials. And I am here today with Ron Young, who was just elected to his third term. Is that correct, as state senator?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, just to kind of start off, I was hoping you could tell me a little bit more about yourself.
Well, how far back you want to go? I was born on Market Street.
Okay, wow.
Grew up in Frederick, went to Frederick High, Frederick Community College. My family didn't have money, so I didn't even go to college at all at first. But eventually did that, and on to the University of Maryland for a bachelor's and what's now McDaniel's for a master's. And while I was working on my master's, I filed to run for Board of Aldermen.
Okay.
And was elected. Served there 4 years. Then I was full-time mayor of Frederick for 16 years. I grew up downtown and I saw it go into total decline and got involved with a bunch of young people my age who weren't happy with what was happening in Frederick City and County. And we started meeting and tried to get some good people to run and couldn't, so we decided to run people from our group. And that's how I got started. And my goal was to try to bring the city back. Downtown was virtually abandoned. If you fired a cannon up the street at 5:15 in the evening, only possible thing you would hit would be a wino. There were no cars, no trees, no businesses much, no people. So spent 16 years bringing the city back. And then I got into some other things, real estate, and governor contacted me, and I went down to Annapolis and Baltimore for 11 and a half years as Deputy Secretary of Maryland Department of Planning and Maryland Department of Natural Resources. And while I was there, Governor Glenn Denning asked me to be the point person on a program we named as Smart Growth, and I took that nationwide. And, you know, along the way, I skipped that, got married, had 4 sons, all of whom are in Frederick, pursuing their careers. I had a reporter ask me when I finished the mayor's office what my greatest accomplishment was. They expected me to say downtown or Carroll Creek or a lot of things like that. And I said that I had 4 sons, and they all went to college, graduated, and came back to Frederick to pursue their careers. And that's what I wanted for every family, that kids could come back here if they wanted to, because most towns across the country, their biggest export's the senior class. They graduate and leave and never come back. And so that was the biggest thing there. Got back out and continued doing some real estate and consulting. I'm a writer and painter, do that. And then 8 years ago, or a little bit more than 8, we had a Tea Party senator from Frederick who paid very little attention to Frederick. And I tried to get somebody to run against him, and no one would, so I decided to, and beat him, and hence I've been there for 8 years, and this is going to be my last term.
Okay. And why did you make that decision?
I'm getting up in age, and while I feel very youthful and healthy, I have a really long bucket list of things I want to do that I haven't done, and I've spent too much of my life doing things that other people ask me to do, and I probably will continue that, but I have at least 34 countries I want to go to I haven't been to.
Wow.
I have a lot of paintings and books to finish. I want to win the 98 over National Singles Tennis Championship. Just have a lot of things in the community and personally that I like to do. So find some more time to spend with grandkids and great-grandkids, and hopefully great-great-grandkids one day.
And I wanted to loop back to the very beginning, because you mentioned your sort of origin story, as a Frederick native.
Hmm.
And what was the city like? You mentioned that the city had gone into decline, but was it like that when you were a young kid?
Oh, when I grew up, I lived downtown and everything was downtown.
Mm-hmm.
We had 4 hotels, 5 and dime stores, whole slew of department stores, 3 movie theaters, about 4 or 5 grocery stores, every other kind of variety you could think. There were no shopping centers.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was downtown, and particularly on weekends, all the farmers and everybody came in, and it was just a really active place, like a lot of towns across the country. And with shopping centers, the downtown started to decline.
Mm.
And when I took office as mayor, you could buy townhouses downtown for $7,000 to $20,000,
Okay.
and the business properties on Market Street were cheap if you could find anybody that even wanted to buy them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I came in, and we talking about news columns. I was in office about 1 month, and in the 20-year ago today column, it said the mayor and board of aldermen discussed building a parking garage. And I said, they've been talking about it for 20 years. It's time to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I built the parking garage. I buried the wires up Market Street. I started filling the stores back up, and then it was a long process of revitalizing the city. And we made some plans in terms of what we thought it could be, and that was arts and entertainment and specialty shops and restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
And we basically had like a hot dog, a hamburger place, and a diner downtown, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
So we went out and started recruiting restaurants, and the idea was to make it a place where somebody going out to dinner just said, let's go downtown, not even necessarily naming a restaurant. Again, playing up the history for tourism on weekends and the entertainment during the week and weekends,
Mm-hmm.
and keeping government downtown, and then restaurants and specialty shops, and then fixing it up.
Mm-hmm.
Worked, and it became an attraction that brought developers in who loved it, and then went out and built on the edge of town and advertised, come live in historic Frederick. So too many towns and cities don't have a there, and we created a there where people would want to come, and it's worked well, and fortunately it's continued, and things like Downtown Frederick Partnership picked up on festivals and things like that to draw people in, that I started doing, and have done a great job in keeping that going.
Mm-hmm. And how old were you when you were first elected alderman?
I think I turned 29 2 weeks before the election.
Okay, wow. And then you served 4 years, and then you wanted to run for mayor. And what made you want to jump in so quickly?
Actually, I wasn't gonna. I was very young compared to everybody else. There were 7 other elected officials, and they were all between 65 and 85. And it was a very tight group, and they kind of shut me out.
Oh, okay. How so?
I was teaching. I couldn't do day meetings, so they scheduled a lot of things in the day. They didn't even have agendas for the meetings. We'd walk in and sit there and see what the mayor brought up.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt like they didn't want my input, and I wasn't involved. And I said, I've had enough of this. And I thought about it a while and said, I'm not a quitter. I'm going to just take the leap and run for mayor. And if I win, I can really start to do something. And if I lose, at least I tried.
Mm-hmm.
So made the decision to go.
Okay. And what was your campaign platform that first run?
Well, my campaign slogan was "Think Young, Vote Young," and downtown revitalization and
Mm-hmm.
trying to bring jobs in and bring the town back was the main thing. And the city was much, much smaller, and I knocked on every door in town twice. I mean every door, not Democrats only, or every door. And I don't think most people thought I had any chance of winning. And I hit enough doors and talked to enough people that I did, and I did. So started off, when I took office, I called in the one assistant the mayor had and asked him what he did, and he said, well, he took minutes at meetings, and he got the mayor's newspaper and coffee and did whatever he asked him to do. And at lunchtime, they'd close the office and hang a sign on the door, out to lunch. I mean, there was nothing going on. So I stirred it up, which it became real controversial, because I often say, people say they don't like anything the way it is, but don't dare change it. And I started changing. And I had probably, I think, the best board of aldermen that ever served the city. They backed me on controversial things. All of them but one lost the next election.
Wow.
And I don't think any of them ever regretted it, because they knew they helped lay the foundation for what Frederick became. And it was real tough after the election. I won, and I was the one that pushed these things, and they all lost. But I walked out, an old man stopped me on the street and said, you really feel bad, don't you? And I said, yeah. He said, you know, when a river comes along and it floods, it sweeps everything away except that one thistle, or it's still standing up. And he said, you're that, so don't feel bad. Feel happy and proud that you're still there and you can keep doing things. And it was always nice over the years when somebody came up and gave you encouragement like that when you felt down, because you do have your ups and downs.
Sure. And I wanted to jump, you won the election, and then you jumped forward just a few years, maybe a couple years, and then there was the Carroll Creek flood. Yeah. I mean, do you remember that day? Could you tell me about it? Yeah.
The night before the flood, I was over in Hagerstown at a municipal league convention, and a guy came up to me and asked me if I'd ever been up over Frederick in a helicopter, and I said no, and he said, well, I fly the state police helicopter. I'll call you in about a week and take you up. Well, I came back to Frederick and went to bed and got up the next morning, and the flood hit, and ironically, he had me up that day looking at the damage. But,
wow.
It was such a struggle right in the beginning trying to get things going, and then we got slammed by this flood, and it really set downtown back, and I knew we had to do something about it. And, on top of everything else, finding the ways and means to bring the town back, and now you've got this facing you. And we looked at alternatives. Hired an engineering firm, looked at alternatives of what we could do, and all the options were either impossible or bad.
How so?
Well, one suggestion was to hold the water west of the city so it didn't come through. There was no place to hold it. Two was to remove the buildings from the floodplain, which meant taking downtown away. Or the third was build this giant storm sewer like they've got up in Cumberland, which would have been a 120 to 150 foot wide concrete channel that right in the center of town. It was ugly and would virtually kill the south end of town. And they were the three options. So we talked and came up with a plan of building that floodway, but doing it in conduits and carrying it through the city in a way that wasn't visible, but that would have eliminated the stream. So we decided, and I started reading about places and looked at San Antonio. And so we built 4 conduits and kept a 20 to 30 foot wide stream in the middle. Before it was just a little creek about 6 inches deep. And we kind of created a river that doesn't flow a lot. And then the idea was to build a parkway over top the conduits and take everything out of the floodplain and have economic development opportunities. the cost was astronomical.
How much?
It was $50 million in 1970, in the 1970s and 80s, which was huge amount of money.
Right.
And I think most people thought it was impossible to get.
Mm-hmm.
But we went to the legislature and got a couple million a year, and I'm writing a book on some of the stories. It's a great story on how we got the final money.
Can you tell me it?
Sure. Governor Schaefer, or Mayor Schaefer, was elected governor, and he was a good friend.
Mm-hmm.
So I scheduled an appointment to talk to him. We needed $36 million to finish the project. And I took Doc McClellan, who had been on my board of aldermen, was now in the legislature with me. He hadn't met Schaefer yet. And I went in, and the governor had 4 or 5 secretaries and a bunch of staff people there. And he said, my staff says I'm making too many commitments, so no commitments today. I just want to hear what you need. Mm-hmm. So I explained the project and what I needed. And he said to Doc, you're going to have to help get the money. Are you committed? And he said, yes. So we talked, and he asked me how much the county had put in it. And I said nothing. And he sat and thought, and he said, they're going to get more benefit out of it than the city or the state, so they should be a partner. And he said, can you put up $12 million? Well, I'd come in asking him for half. I was going to put up $18 million, so yeah, I said, I can do 12. So will you do 12, the state will do 12, and the county will do 12.
Okay.
No commitments, that's how we're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And said to Doc McClellan, I want a commitment from the county for $12,000 by Thursday. Mm-hmm. This was like Monday. Mm-hmm. And he said, and tell them if they don't do it, I'm going to be governor for 7 more years, and they won't get 1 penny from the state for anything. Mm. And so Doc came back, and we'll go through that part, but he got the county to commit to $12 million.
Okay.
So we had the $36 million to finish it.
Wow.
And that was just the flood control part.
Yeah, I know that at least at the beginning, it was pretty desolate, Carroll Creek.
It was. I had intended on doing the parkway in the next 4 years in office, but very frankly, I had a lot of projects going, and people kept coming to me and saying, if you do all these projects, especially Carroll Creek, mm-hmm. People don't want it, you're going to lose the election. Mm-hmm. And I said, I guess I'll lose.
Why didn't people want the creek?
It was expensive. They didn't believe in it. They mm-hmm. didn't think it would happen. They couldn't picture what it would look like. Mm-hmm. So we went ahead with it, and I lost the next election. I've had people say to me since then, if you knew that was going to be the result, would you have done it anyhow? And I said, I knew it was going to be the result, and I did do it anyhow. Mm-hmm. I've always tried to think 20 to 50 years out, and that's not always best for elections because they're 4-year cycles, and if you're thinking too far ahead and things are cost, it can cost you. Mm-hmm. But you don't get things accomplished if you don't plan that way.
Okay. And I know in past articles that we ran, the 1989 election, the one you lost, was described as very bitterly contested. And why was that?
Well, my chairman of the planning commission ran against me, and he was an accountant, and I say a bean counter, and he was arguing that, we were financially breaking the city and all that, but and some people still think that. It was ridiculous. I cut the tax rate 8 times in 16 years because we brought new development and business in, and property values went up, mm-hmm. and I had a good surplus, and I'm a strong believer, and I think Frederick proves it, that if you invest in your infrastructure and attract the private sector, you'll do well enough that it more than covers the cost of the capital projects, and that's what I was able to do. The taxes increased enough that I cut the tax rate and still could build the projects. And mm-hmm. I think it's proven out over the years. And
yeah.
I wish the U.S. government thought that way more.
But how did it feel to lose after 16 years as mayor?
Well, winning always feels better than losing, but I think sometimes losing develops more character than winning. It's how you handle it. Mm-hmm. I often joked that I was going to get up and say a bad word the next morning and laugh and go ahead with my life, and I did, and it didn't work. So I said a harsher bad word and laughed and went on with my life. And I have really enjoyed all the things I've gotten to do, but I forgot this sometimes, and I try to tell younger people that try to do a good job, but remember, it's a job, it's not your life. And like I said, I wish I'd remembered that a few times more than I did.
Sure.
But I have lots of things in life I've done and want to do. And so I have people today, do you miss being a teacher? Or do you miss being mayor? Or do you miss... And it's fun to reminisce occasionally, but I'm more interested in what I'm going to do tomorrow. The past is gone.
And what did you teach at FCPS? I forgot to ask.
Well, I was going to be a social studies teacher, but they didn't need anybody. It's a lot of people want that. So I taught 5th and 6th grade for 6.5 years. And I taught a class at Hood and a class at FCC. And, well, I won't give her age away, but my treasurer, I taught 4th grade 1 year, and my treasurer was in my 4th grade class.
Oh, okay.
And won't be too many years, and she'll be ready for retirement. But it's nice to make connections with kids like that carries forth. I can imagine somebody that taught it 30 years, the relationships and watching certain kids do well and whatever is great. I know I got it from 6.5 years.
Yeah. And I think you touched on this a little bit earlier in the interview, but in 2010, explain why you wanted to kind of hop back in the saddle and run for senator.
I think that Frederick still needed a lot of things that required state help, and we weren't getting it. I didn't like the then senator's political philosophies, and I didn't like the fact that you never saw him anywhere, and he didn't bring things back to the community. And like I said, I tried to find someone else to run and couldn't. Most people thought he couldn't be beaten. And I think even the Senate down there didn't think he could. They helped me because they knew I campaigned hard. And I did beat him, but it was close. And he moved over to West Virginia and is in Congress now.
Oh, who was it?
Alex Mooney.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wow. And I know that, you served the city of Frederick for, the majority of your early political career. So I was wondering, do you still see the city as a first priority, even as a state legislator?
Well, I have to look at the whole state, but yeah, one of the principal things I want to do is find ways to help Frederick. And, we've been battling to get the infrastructure money to support bringing a hotel downtown.
Yeah.
That's still a top priority. That was in our plans way back. As a matter of fact, in 1989, I had a hotel site awarded on the creek, and Old City Hall was going to be converted into a 75-room hotel. And after I left, they both fell through. And so we're still fighting to get that hotel. It's one thing that downtown really needs. There are not many towns this large, this strong, that don't have a couple of hotels downtown. And and then, we get a certain amount of capital money each year and help a lot of groups with that. So, and I'm still very, very pro-education, and that's one of many areas I work. So I'm on the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee, and we do almost every policy item that comes through. So it's you certainly learn a lot because you see a bit of everything.
Sure.
And this year, the President of the Senate's appointed me to head the Executive Nominations Committee, so the governor's appointments all come through me, and they just asked me to step in and finish out on the Kerwin Commission, which is Dr. Kerwin's looking to try to get Maryland back to number one in education in the country, and he says number one in the world. I don't know if we can make that. I just want one of the strongest educational systems you can have.
Yeah. And circling back to the hotel project, I wanted to ask, I mean, it's a pretty controversial project for some people. And so why do you support it? What do you think the economic benefits are?
Well, as I explained to somebody, I never did one project in bringing the town back that wasn't controversial. There's always a small group that I guess their purpose in life is to be against things. As I said, a lot of people say, I don't like anything the way it is, but don't dare change it. And I got sued over the underground wire. I got cussed out 7 days a week for 2 years on the parking garage. I had a whole church out working against me for bringing a baseball stadium in. Go down, somebody lines up and fights everything. And they've done that with a hotel. A lot of the people moved in here, and they don't remember what it was and what the plans were to make it something different. So they move in and like it the way it was the day they got here, and they don't want it to change now. The downtown hotel, we have about 80 biotech firms in the county now and city. They want to bring national and international conferences here. It was the Chamber's #1 project. We've made tourism a major thing downtown. A lot of people, we're a restaurant center for the state. And a lot of people like to come up and have dinner and maybe have a drink and walk around and would like to spend the night and not drive home. And so a downtown hotel conference center like that sorely needed. And I also served as president of East Frederick Rising since I've been out, which is to redevelop the eastern part of town. The hotel down on the creek there will be an impetus to a bunch of projects that have been on the books and haven't moved forward. It'll be a major economic boost for that part of town and for the whole town. We've had a lot of small shops downtown that are what I called hobby businesses. Somebody always wanted to own a card shop, so they come in and do a really nice card shop, and they do it for 2 or 3 or 4 years, and their spouse supports them because they don't make any money, and then the glow rubs off, so they try to find somebody else that wants a hobby shop. I want the activity there that every business there can make it and actually make a living for somebody. So you have to have the people to do that. And there are very few places anywhere where you can have a conference and the spouse could just walk out the front door of the hotel and go to restaurants and shops and have the beauty of the creek. They're generally either in a big city where some people don't feel safe, or out along interchange at a highway or at the ocean. So it's rare to have something like that in a city like Frederick that has all those attractions to bring it. So it's just going to be a major boost for the town.
And in your mind, the funding from the state would be paid back through hotel taxes that would be raised through the hotel?
Yeah, and actually they've cut the amount they need now. So the money isn't going to the hotel at all. It's going for infrastructure around it, parking and other things. And it will pay itself back in new taxes for the state in a relatively short amount of time. But in addition to that, it's going to spur a lot of other development around it that everybody's going to benefit from the tax benefits and activity created there. So it was and still is a very important cog in making the whole thing work the way we planned it. And I feel that after this hotel's built, within 5 years, the second one will be built. And just push things on even farther.
Yeah. Well, I ask all this because I know that, it's been a priority for the city for a long time, but right now it's kind of held up with the Board of Public Works, which Governor Hogan heads, and he does not support using state money for the project. So how do you get around that?
Well, the only reason he didn't support it is the first year, all 8 members of our delegation supported it. And then a guy bought a hotel on the edge of town and got to the 5 Republicans and turned them on it. And so the governor goes along with the delegation. The guy that bought the hotel also hired a lobbyist who's really good friends with the governor. And so he got the governor to back off of it. I think the governor will hopefully either change his mind in the second term, or if not, there are ways we can go around him.
Mm-hmm. And is getting that funding a priority for you this session?
It's been a priority and still is, yeah.
Okay.
It's, you know, if it wasn't for the dynamics of the money and the 5 Republicans, now it's 4-4 now. Mm-hmm. But if it weren't for that, it's a project that the governor would support it with no hesitation. It's an economic development project. It's going to create lots of new jobs, not just at the hotel, but on what happens around it. Mm-hmm. And it's the kind of thing he says he believes in. Okay.
Well, before we move on to other legislative priorities this session, I wanted to ask about the delegation meeting last month.
Okay.
Because I know that Delegate Carroll was appointed chair, and that was something that you and Delegate Lewis Young seemed pretty opposed to. And I was wondering why you raised such opposition, especially in the first delegation meeting of the year.
Well, very frankly, Senator Huff has controlled the delegation and who was chair and who's vice chair for 4 years, because they had 5 Republicans, and the Republicans don't buck anything he wants. Mm-hmm. So this time it was 4-4. And I submitted a proposal that for 2 years we'd have a Democratic chair. We could alternate first and third or second and fourth.
Right.
And the other 2, the Republicans, would have a chair. Mm-hmm. And whenever one party was the chair, somebody from the other party would be the vice chair. Now that's 8 positions in 4 years, and there's 8 of us. Mm-hmm. So everyone, if they wanted to be, could have been a chair or a vice chair one of those times. Thought that was very fair. Mm-hmm. We all bought into it. A couple of the Republicans said they thought it looked good, but Senator Huff talked to them. Mm-hmm.
And when you say that we all bought into it, you made some calls before you brought up the plan in the meeting?
Delegate Lewis Young and Delegate Kerr were good with the plan. We had talked to Carroll and felt she had committed to the plan. Mm-hmm. Now, she wanted to be chair very badly, and we told her she could be chair for the first year. Mm-hmm. We weren't opposing her being chair. We were opposing letting somebody from the other party control what was going to happen in the next 4 years again. Mm-hmm. And so when we brought it up to do the 4-4 thing, she didn't vote for it. Mm-hmm. She wanted to be chair, and Senator Huff had called her in advance and worked that out, and we felt that she abandoned us.
Okay.
And didn't go along with the proposal that made it fair for everybody. I have no interest in being chair of the delegation. Mm-hmm. First off, it doesn't really mean that much.
Right.
The county has all its own legislation now. We do alcohol bills and bond bills, and can listen to other people, but that's all as a delegation we really do. I'm chair of a couple committees and a subcommittee. I don't need that. She wanted to do it. That was fine. Karen would have liked to have done it 1 year. That was fine. So in the proposal, I just said the Democrats would choose who was going to be chair and vice chair in their 4 years, or 2 years, and the Republicans in theirs. And, I have a hard time seeing how anybody argues with the fairness of that. But we felt, we got duped and objected strongly to the way it was done, not the fact that she's chair.
Okay, because I just wonder if maybe Delegate Lewis Young wanted to be chair first, because it did seem in the meeting, watching the meeting, that there is some personal animosity there.
We had all agreed that Carroll would be chair the first year. Nobody had any problem with that. But it wasn't the fact that she's chair. it was the political manipulations behind the scenes that she worked with them rather than us, and went against, a plan that was totally balanced and fair.
And when you say that Senator Huff has sort of had a grip on the delegation, what do you mean by that?
Well, he had a grip on all the Republicans, and there were 5 of them and 3 of us. And as a matter of fact, Delegate Vogt was considering coming over and supporting the hotel with us, and so he took him off his ticket, so he didn't run again.
Do you have evidence of that? You know for a fact that happened?
Yeah.
How?
Well, Delegate Vogt, he was getting remarried and knew he had a tough race if he wasn't on the ticket, and he was looking for a job, and he just decided he didn't want to do it anymore.
And he told you that?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So, that's politics, but we didn't like it and didn't think it was fair. We, animosity. Delegate Lewis Young and I both donated to Carroll Crim's campaign because she couldn't raise money. I put together a slate, and she couldn't afford to be on it. We put her on it with the money we donated to her. Karen took her literature around. So it wasn't anything we helped her. We didn't get help back. She wasn't in a position to do it. And then we felt she walked away from us.
It was just interesting to me because I watched, that exchange, and I know that it dominated about like the first 25 minutes of a 2-hour meeting. And I was wondering if you think that it will make, this session a little bit more difficult, because it did seem like you and Delegate Lewis Young against the rest of the delegation.
No, Ken Kerr was with us on it, but he kind of edged away. It ain't going to make anything difficult because it's over. And like I said, all we do is bond bills and liquor bills anyhow. And, I'm right now, unless it changes, chair of the liquor issues in the Senate side. And the bond issues, we're each kind of allocated a certain amount of money. So I can give it to who I think needs it here, and so can Senator Huff, and so can the delegates. So, no, it just was bad feelings because we felt we were done in.
Has it been smoothed over? Or there's still?
Oh, it's behind us. We've had meetings. I mean, it isn't anything to fret about as far as the future is concerned. It'll be interesting next year to see what happens.
Well, moving on to this session, I know that one of your first motions was to pre-file a bill that would allow, I think it was income tax exemptions for medical cannabis growers, processors, and dispensaries. And I thought that was interesting. So could you tell me a little bit more about that?
That's real simple. Every business in the state is allowed to deduct their expenses. Like the newspaper here can deduct the cost of the equipment and the cost of employees and whatever from their taxes. The cannabis business, they're not allowed to do that. They pay taxes on every cent they sell, and they're not allowed to deduct their expenses. So and they're the only business in the state that's treated that way. And just feel that it was unfair.
Okay. And as part of that, do you see medical cannabis as a growing industry for Frederick? Because we did have the first licensed dispensary in the state.
Oh, it's a growing business everywhere. And very frankly, I think recreational marijuana is going to be legal in the country within 5 years.
Wow, okay.
So, it's just, they came to me and I thought it was a fairness issue. It's not my number one item in my agenda, but it's a fairness.
Okay. And what is the number one item in your agenda?
Well, I don't prioritize them that way, but I've got a bill back in that I've had in for a number of years. An awful lot of seniors in Maryland retire and move out of Maryland because of the state income tax. And they go to Delaware, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, or South. And there are studies that show you lose a lot when you lose them. If they stay, they still pay other taxes. They pay their real estate tax, they pay sales tax, other things like that. And then you also lose them as volunteers. A lot of seniors retire and want to get involved in the community, and if they're gone, they can't. So I think, looking at studies, it's worth keeping them here. So the idea was to phase out state income tax on seniors that make less than $100,000 a year in retirement.
Okay.
So that's one I have in. I have one in that's called the Business Fairness Act. Our large corporations don't pay business taxes or anything here. Walmart transfers all their profits back to Arkansas and pays taxes there, and so does Target and Nordstrom's and the food chains. They transfer their profits back. We lose about $50 million a year in Maryland because of that. And it's no extra money that you or I pay. We're already paying it. It's just where they pay their taxes. And 26 states have adopted what's called combined reporting. That would mean that whatever percentage of profit that Walmart has or Target, they would pay, that they make in Maryland, they would pay the taxes in Maryland. If you go out and look at the little centers that Walmart's in, they're not paying those taxes. The little card shop right up the street is paying taxes.
Sure.
And it's unfair, and it's a loss of revenue to Maryland. So I have that back in. I also have a bill in that I had 36 senators co-sponsor and nobody opposed, but it wasn't let come to a vote. The veterans clubs all have, they don't call them slots, but 5 instant bingo machines or whatever. They're like slot machines.
Yeah.
And the fraternal clubs would like to have them. And they donate a lot back to the community. So I had a bill in to allow them to have 5 also, and the state's profit would go to support homeless veterans.
Okay.
So I called it the slots for homeless veterans. It would really, the housing people said it could pretty much eliminate the homeless problem for veterans in the state. The Veterans Caucus has endorsed it. The Housing Department liked it. The Veterans Administration liked it. The governor's office had no problem with it. Like I said, 36 of the other 46 senators co-sponsored it. Nobody opposed it. Didn't get a vote.
Okay, and why was that?
It was held back by a couple people who didn't want the expansion of gambling, but we're expanding gambling constantly. Sports betting can be allowed and taxed now.
Right.
We've allowed the big casinos. These clubs having 5 machines doesn't hurt anything. It's a membership club, and it's just their members that play. People can't come in from outside like it's a casino.
Okay, so you plan to reintroduce that
I'm
bill.
reintroducing that.
Okay. And then in terms of some of the big issues that are projected to come up, like the deficit, for example, I know that we're facing a $1.3 billion deficit in the next 5 fiscal years. And do you have any ideas on how to manage that?
Well, it's a structural deficit, and it's projected. We've been working at eliminating the structural deficit. It looks like we're going to have a very huge surplus this year.
Right.
But going out, it can build back. Unfortunately, the way the legislature works, I'm not on the budget committee. So at the end of the year, I get to say yes or no to the budget. And other than a couple bills that I mentioned that affect the budget, I and most people don't get a say on it otherwise. But we do look at it every year, and there are things we can do. We try to cap it. States have to have a balanced budget. structural budget is something that it looks like they're projecting out that spending will increase more than revenues. So you either carry the structural deficit and you cover it from year to year, or you try to make cuts or increase revenue to balance it. So I'm sure we'll be looking at all those options.
Okay. And this is another issue that, will affect Frederick County pretty heavily. But how do you feel about the governor's proposed public-private partnership for I-270 and adding toll roads?
I'm not in favor of that.
Okay.
I think we can do other things to do it. I don't mind some private-public partnerships, but not a toll road on something like that. I don't think, from what I understand, it's worked that well in Virginia. And it's very expensive. And basically, it's creating a lane for people that can afford it. And it takes some traffic off. But in any case, even when we widen it to 3 lanes, it's going to fill back up.
Right.
And we'll have the same problem. I saw a cartoon in California once. It had 20 lanes going one way, 20 lanes going the other, and all the cars are stopped, and the voice box comes out and says, as soon as they add 2 more lanes, it's called induced traffic. And where there's a heavy place that people want to travel, even when you widen it, more traffic comes. So I do think we probably need to add the 3rd lane. It's only about 12 miles down. We've got to continue looking at mass transit, and we do such a poor job in that compared to Europe. I started back in the 80s when I was mayor, working with the county in Montgomery County to reserve right-of-ways to one day bring Metro all the way to Frederick. I don't think I'm going to live to see that, but I keep trying to get it into plans so we can reserve the right-of-ways. If you lose the right-of-ways, it can't happen. And that happens too many places. We have programs around the country called Rails to Trails, where they take up the rails and make it a trail. I think it's a horrible mistake.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I don't mind rails and trails. We shouldn't take the rails up. We can put a trail along the rails. But once you take the rails up, the possibility of it ever getting that right of way back for train use is gone. And we just don't have the kind of train system we should have. As I said, go to Europe and train runs every hour, right on the minute. The traffic is way less. And there are studies showing we cannot build the roads to handle future traffic. So we've got to be a little more visionary. And I've suggested over the years, and I did when I was at the Department of Planning, laying out a 100-year plan for transportation and showing a rail system and a road system, and basically telling local government, this is what we're going to build. Excuse me. Plan your development around it, and they won't do it.
Well, we've talked a lot about politics, and I also wanted to give people the chance to get to know you a little bit better. And I was wondering, just starting off broadly, could you tell me, of course, a lot of them are well known around the county, but could you tell me a little bit more about your family?
Well, you know my wife. I think you're interviewing her next.
Yep.
I have 4 sons.
Okay.
And Karen has a daughter. But my oldest son served 1 term on was elected to the Democratic Central Committee and was vice chair of it for a term, and decided not to do it anymore. He's worked in computers for 30 years and has a law degree.
Okay, and what is his name?
Brian.
Okay.
My second son, Brad, owns his own financial management company, and he and his wife and her 2 brothers own Riverside Liquor Store. He's president of the Board of Education.
Right.
Coached girls softball at Walkersville High and at Hood College. He teaches part-time at Mount St. Mary's. He was president of the American Association of Community Colleges. So he's been very involved in education that way and in the community in general. My third son that's Brad. Third son's Blaine. He was president of the county commissioners. He's the one Republican in the family.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you about that because how did it feel to have a son branch off like that and go so staunchly Republican?
Well, I would have rather he hadn't, but he's still my son. So, we don't agree politically, but that's just life. It happens in a lot of families.
Yeah. Well, and as a father, how did it feel, the sexual scandals that he got caught up in as well?
Yeah, well, you don't enjoy them. I'm sure he didn't enjoy it either. Getting caught up, but you go on. Your kids are your kids, and I told somebody once, you watch them grow up and become successful, and you're proud and you hold your breath. But they each have to live their own lives. And so he's remarried and has another position, and they're starting a little business, and things seem to be going well for him. So that's good. I'm happy for him. And then my fourth son is Alex.
Okay.
And he works for a company called Experian, which does, I don't know if you know them or not, they do conference planning around the country. He's been with them for about 17 years. And he married a young lady from that's a school teacher. Ironically, they graduated from the same college the same year.
Oh, okay.
And he ran on the boys' track team, and she ran on the girls' track team. And they totally didn't know each other. They met in downtown Frederick.
Oh, that's funny.
So they just lost their dog, but they both went to James Madison, so they had a dog named Madison.
Oh, okay.
But Brian and Kathy decided not to have kids. Brad has three beautiful daughters, only girls in the family there.
Wow.
Blaine has two sons, I think 9th and 11th grade. They're both 6'2". I think the one's going to go way beyond that.
Wow. And
Alex has two boys also.
Okay.
So, and then Brad's oldest daughter has a boy and a girl. So I'm a great-grandfather.
Wow. And with such a political family, do you guys talk about politics, like at home, or no?
Not too much.
Okay, not too much.
No.
Okay. And how did you and Delegate Lewis Young meet?
She was president of the Weinberg Center.
Okay.
And they were having some problems and talking about privatizing or things like that. And one of the board members said, well, why don't somebody talk to Ron Young? I started the Weinberg Center, and said he's been through all this before. Does anybody know him? And Karen said, well, I'll call him. And so she called me, and we went out to lunch together for a couple hours. And then about a month later, I ran into her downtown and went in to have dinner by myself somewhere, and she was too. We talked and started dating.
Okay. And when did you marry her?
About 13 years ago.
Okay, wow.
If you ask her that question, it's 12. I always
Well, I'll tell her. I'll tattle. Well, and I had some rapid fire questions too for you, if you're ready.
Okay, rapid fire.
Okay, well, the first one is pretty easy, and it's just it's whether you are a dog or a cat person.
A dog.
A dog person. Do you have any dogs?
Well, we had 3 rescues. One just passed. We still have 2.
Okay, what are their names?
Andy and Poppy.
Okay.
Poppy, her daughter found on the streets of Miami, and he was born just about the time her father died, who they called Poppy. So she named it. She figured there was a connection there, so she named it Poppy.
Okay. And what about Andy?
Andy, one of the first places I ever took her was up to New York to the U.S. Open, and Andy Roddick won it that year.
Okay. That's funny. And what about pie or cake? Are you a pie or cake person?
Pie.
Okay. What's your favorite type of pie?
graham cracker banana cream.
Graham cracker banana cream. Okay, that's
And
very
then-
specific.
Then fruit pies after that.
Okay.
I do like carrot cake, but otherwise I'm a pie eater.
You're a pie guy. Okay.
Don't eat too much of either. But
Do you have a favorite food in general?
Maryland hard shell crabs
Okay.
and corn on the cob.
Okay. So you're a real Marylander then?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the next one is a little tougher.
Okay.
But if you could have dinner with 3 people, living or dead, what 3 people would you have dinner with?
Thomas Jefferson, John Kennedy, and Michelangelo.
Okay. Michelangelo?
Yeah.
Why those 3?
Well, the 2 of them were really brilliant, and one, Kennedy, was very charismatic, and one that re-energized my interest in politics. He isn't the one that got me into it, but he re-energized it.
Oh,
and
interesting.
I just thought he was a really interesting person.
Mm-hmm. Who did get you into politics then? Was there someone who inspired you?
I was 12 years old, and Adlai Stevenson ran against Eisenhower.
Okay. Wow.
And I went door to door for him, and was his campaign manager in my junior high school. And I just got interested, thought he was a brilliant guy, but he didn't have Eisenhower's smile or personality, and he lost badly.
Well, sort of along the same notes, do you have a favorite book of all time?
Probably Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky.
Okay, wow.
But Bernard Malamud was my overall favorite author.
Okay. Do you have any favorite books of his?
Almost all of them.
Okay.
I read every book he wrote.
Okay, wow.
Towards the end, I kept thinking, oh, this is the last one, because I'm sure he passed away, and then a new one would come out, and I'd read that and not hear anything, say, well, I guess he did pass. Finally, I picked up Newsweek one day, and his obituary was on the last page.
Oh, yeah. Then you knew.
I knew.
Yeah. And what about movies? Do you have 3 movies? If you had to take 3 movies onto a desert island, which movies would you choose?
Wow. I'm a real movie buff, so I...
Okay.
The original From Here to Eternity.
Okay, wow.
Unbearable Likeness of Being. And, well, third one. Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind, okay. Wow, you'd kill a lot of time then at first on the
Yes.
desert island. What was the last movie you saw, if you're a film buff?
The Favorite.
The Favorite? Oh, did you like that? I really want to see it.
I liked it, but I was a little disappointed.
Okay. Why?
Well, it was about 2 women who were seeking the Queen's favor, and I don't know if we'll talk about this. They both, were very sexual with her.
Oh.
And the one that finally won out, it appeared by winning she was going to have sex with the Queen the rest of her life.
Scandalous. Oh, gosh.
I mean, I'm not a prude in that way, but it just, it was humorous at times. I like those period movies, but I don't know, I was just expecting more.
Okay.
Sometimes if you expect too much, it hurts it because...
Yeah. Well, this is another slightly scandalous question, but what is your alcoholic drink of choice?
Oh, God. Just a very occasional glass of wine, or a Prosecco, or a beer occasionally. I'm not much of a drinker.
Okay.
My father was an alcoholic, and I just never, I don't even think I had a drink till I was almost 30 years old.
Sure.
It was funny, when I was mayor, I constantly got accused of being into bars drunk.
Really?
Because I went in all the restaurants downtown because I helped a lot of them come and I knew the owners. I usually had a club soda or a Diet Coke, but everybody in there drinking assumed I was too. And I mean, I don't have anything against it. I just don't drink that much.
Okay, sure. Well, I know that you are an avid artist, which we've discussed before, but I also wanted to ask, I think that you said, or you've mentioned before, that you're working on 5 books. Can you tell me about them? Kind of, okay.
They're pretty lazy about it. I'm doing one called My Story, Who Are We But Our Stories? And it's 500 plus 1/3 to 2-page stories of growing up in Frederick in the 16 years I was mayor, and how we brought the town back and all. And that one, I probably have 75% finished.
Wow, okay.
And I'm doing one called Frederick's Time Traveler, where I jump around in history and take important or interesting events in Frederick. And I write a diary entry like I was there. And then I do a paragraph or 2 on the relevant history and a map of 125 of them and where they're located. So it's tourism guide and tidbits of history.
Okay.
And then on the Frederick end, I'm doing, I want to do one of my 100 paintings of the historic district and possibly a few stories about each painting. So those 3. And then I'm working on 2 other novels, though. The one's really lagged. I haven't done much on it.
What is it about?
It's a follow-up to the one I've already gotten published.
Oh, okay, wow.
And then there's one called Mondays Forever.
Okay, what is Mondays Forever about?
It's kind of a love story.
Okay. Can you describe the plot to me at all? Give me a little sneak peek.
It's about an African-American woman who grew up on East 3rd Street in Frederick. And she went to Europe in World War II, at the end of World War II, to volunteer, met a war correspondent who was white. They fell in love. He was married to an invalid who died not too long after that. Anyhow, she got pregnant, which she didn't do back then. And she met an Italian lady who was her friend, and they brought the daughter back here. And she eventually got a job in Baltimore at the Pratt Library, and Enoch Pratt Library. And he walked in one day. They'd lost contact. He was a newspaper editor at the Baltimore News American. Basically, they saw each other every Monday for over 40 years. And it's the story of their life together.
Wow.
And they started writing books together, and he became published in his name. He became a bestseller. And they split the money.
Okay.
And then her daughter grew up and had 2 daughters, and then was killed in an accident. So the 2 old ladies raised the 2 young girls. And at the beginning of the book, she's in bed dying, waiting for the 2 girls to come back. She's kind of arguing with God, you know. You've waited for me 87 years. You can wait a couple more hours.
Yeah, that's
interesting. And then they discover that she's really their grandmother, and I won't tell you the end.
Well, it's interesting to me. I mean, I wonder, you mentioned, you know, that one of the protagonists is an African-American woman who lived on East 3rd Street in Frederick. And I was wondering, like, when you were growing up, was Frederick still segregated?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Wow.
Except that 3 doors down from my house was the parsonage and then the black church.
Okay.
African-American church. So in an all-white neighborhood, we had that church. I said, I grew up laying in bed listening to gospel music. But we didn't have, school didn't integrate till my senior year. First African-American student was in high school.
Wow, okay.
And so I knew a lot of African-American kids. One lived up around the corner from me, and we all played football together. And then my grandmother took care of us, some up at her house. It was an African-American neighborhood there. We played with those kids. But we never really thought about it.
Yeah. Then, I mean, when you took over as mayor and you served for 16 years, you kind of have to. Did you do anything to kind of address that legacy?
Yeah, I was very tight with the African American community. As a matter of fact, got thrown out of a private club with the president of the NAACP.
Wow, when was that?
I submitted him for membership, and they accepted him, and I took him in, and they threw us both out.
What was the country
It was
club?
called the Democratic Club at the time. Now it's the Patriotic Club, but I think it's closing.
Okay, where is it?
On East 4th Street,
Interesting.
on the other side of East Street. And it was Lord Nickens, who was president of the NAACP, and he's the one on the mural up at 7th.
Right.
They threatened to get us arrested and threw us out. And I was told I'd never win another election in 1969. And, but he lived till he was 101, and he told the story at a lot of banquets, and it got better over the years. You never let facts interfere with a really good story. By the end, we were locked up in jail, and there was a lynch mob outside.
Oh my gosh.
Stop calling.
Don't worry about it. Well, Senator, I only have one more question for you. And you mentioned that you had a large bucket list and a lot of things that you wanted to do. So I was wondering what the top 3 items on your bucket list are.
Reach 200 paintings, finish the books. I have 34 countries I want to visit.
Okay.
I want to win the 90 and over National Singles Tennis Championship.
So do you play tennis, obviously?
I've played tennis for 60 years.
Okay, wow.
A little more than that now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the top country you want to visit?
I don't know. There's a lot of them. I guess I'd have to say it's not one, but the British Isles.
Okay.
One side of my family goes back through a whole bunch of kings years ago back there, and I haven't really spent much time there. The other side came from Germany, and I have been to the cities where my family was from there.
Okay.
So I guess those. I could start naming them. People always say, "What's your top 1, 2, or 3?" And I've just got a long list and want to do them all.
Sure, sure. Well, Senator, thank you very much for coming in and speaking with me this morning.
Certainly.
I appreciate it.
I do.